I think that I've been doing event a lot in Hanoi before, and it's good to be back here again to see a lot of familiar faces and having a conversation with you all before we start our presentation. My presentation today, we have 4 parts. Before we talking about any forecast, then we look at what is the fundamental of the northern of Vietnam. And I'm going straight into that. Of course, you heard so much about GDP of the Vietnam, and here I'm not going to talking about the GDP growth, but I'm going to talking about the comparison of GDP of Vietnam to other countries in Asia Pacific. And we can see in the past 5 years, Vietnam has been growing significantly in terms of GDP. And Northern contributed 27% to the GDP of entire country. This is quite interesting to give us a comparison in terms of FDI flowing to the Southeast Asia and where Vietnam stands for. And to put in this perspective, that we're comparing what are the peers that always investor and corporation investing in Southeast Asia, 2 countries they are considering, Indonesia and Vietnam. And we can see, in the past 5 years, the FDI that investing in Vietnam starting growing bigger and bigger. And in terms of the Northern, it accounted for 37% compared to the entire country. Now, this everyone already know. I'm not going to mention again. And also, as an open trading economy, Vietnam be friends with anyone, signing a trade agreement with all the region, the key region. And I'm going to deep dive inside what region. What does that mean in terms of trading partner to Vietnam? And people talking about middle class in Vietnam has been rising. The reason is showing that 10% increase per annum. But also if we look at the base, that Vietnam is still low compared to Singapore. For the e-commerce in Vietnam, forecasting from 2020 to 2025, we can see that growing 37% and reach to 39 billion. And also another chart to show you in terms of how the e-commerce forecasting growing until 2025. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of the external. I'd like to break down the challenges in 2 parts. External part of what happened outside the country. And the second part, I would like to emphasize the challenges happening within the country that we are operating business. Yesterday, I just walked by one of the banks increasing the interest rate for the saving account up to some bank at 8.5%. So you can do the math. What is the mortgage interest rate right now for some bank? And the fact is, within the country, the challenges, interest rate, if you are operating real estate business, which is a very high intensive capital investment, interest rate is something very sensitive for the entire market. And right now, interest rate has been changed and modified 3 times, right? Or some bank more than 3 times. That internal. Aside from that, the whole assessment of the government and also investigation to some key group, and we talk here to look at the situation, how the challenge going to impact the entire market. For sure it will. External factors. Yes, Vietnam is always a hotspot for a lot of investors coming to Vietnam. But right now, the interest rate of Australian dollars, pounds, euro, decline, depreciate, right? A lot of deals, few deals that we're working with some developer in the room here, impacted because of the completion of the deal, because of that. So everyone, if they hold the big institutional fund, they hold the big portfolio, real estate portfolio in the world. Right now, some lost 10 to 15% of the value. And of course, Vietnam is still priority list for them to invest. But right now, they would like to see how the situation gonna turn out. So everyone concerned of the situation and how we should act to the situation. And I'm sure that you are operating business in either industrial park or commercial real estate or residential real estate. You're facing the different challenges. So that's why so important. We put this report today for you, that you can explain What is the fundamental? Putting together in perspective, talking about challenges, talking about opportunity. Vietnam, one thing I learned when I do presentation, everyone talking about opportunity. You come here, everyone to try to sell you opportunities. But I always like to look at another side of the coin. What are the challenges? And right now, during the challenges, prioritization, focus, require more than ever. So the presentation today also emphasize for the sectors that haven't drawn clear legal framework, everything is already right set up, that, that's something we should focus on. Moving to the next part, I'm going to explain why the northern of Vietnam is an extended arm. In terms of the export and import value, Vietnam stands out just right after Singapore, and that figure is very important for Vietnam become a, especially for industrial and logistics sectors, a growth sector in Vietnam. And this key export market of Vietnam, the US is the biggest market to us. Second of all, China. Korea also one of the very important export market to Vietnam. And next to it, it's Europe. So there's a top three export market to Vietnam in general. This is also another figure we put together to give you illustration on the manufactured products out of the country is 89%. This figure says something to us. What does that say? The product before Vietnam is just export, raw materials, assembled product. Now, the export 89% is a complete product. Import, raw material, the other way around. That's what I would like to emphasize. Vietnam is a reliable trade partner in the region. And what leads us to this statement is that we comparison to our performance to our trade partners to US, Europe, China, everyone, those three key regions are the region that very important in terms of trading partners. And you see, South Korea has been increasing significantly in terms of Vietnam contribution, nearly 10% for import-export to the country. And then also, if we look at another figure showing Vietnam in terms of trade partners that has been improving in terms of how we gain credibility to our trade partner, key trade partner in the region. And now we're focusing on the North, and I like to always comparison the North and the South to give us a perspective. Here, in terms of cargo volume through road that export, if we see compared to the North and the South, the Northern always stand out much larger figure compared to the South. If the export through the road and the highways. Another figure I would like to take us to, everyone know, come to the North, come to Vietnam, they say, infrastructure in the North, great, awesome, connectivity regional, much better than any other region in the country. That's true. One thing I think that's quite key for us to really understand is that the land compensation for a lot of industrial park operating your business here is a key challenge. Right? I can see a lot of people agree with me down there. And right now, even more greater challenge with the land compensation rate that the government talking about and going to be applied, that cause some concern. Bear in mind, the road improvement continue to the north and the central. So we can see some of the expansion business to the central north of Vietnam in the future as well. Well, it's very well connected to China. That's one thing everyone knows. Now, I move to another 5 key border gate, which is just very important to us to imported product and also imported product from China. And you can see a lot of infrastructure together with industrial park along to key critical infrastructure system of the northern of Vietnam. This is very important. Now, I talk in the whole thing, finishing about giving the import-export value for the north and also road infrastructure. Now, I'm moving to the second part. If we're talking about import-export, we look at infrastructure road. Now we look at air cargo, which is very important figure for us to look at. Vietnam just behind Singapore. And guess what? The northern of Vietnam triple size in terms of the air cargo export volume. So road and air cargo, totally, the northern of Vietnam infrastructure much better. Now, to put it in perspective, believe it or not, in the northern of Vietnam, we have 66 cargo airlines. Singapore, we have 99. We always put Singapore at the transshipment hub, so we compare to Singapore, that's 99. We're not that bad. We only second Singapore. Singapore, 2 million. We 1.2. The northern is already 70% of it. So now, if we look at another figures, what is just forecasted, look at in terms of the export through the port, the deep sea port. Of course, southern is dominant, right? The southern, you can see the figures, is very dominant. Haiphong accounted for 80% total northern export volume. And this is another important figure for us to look at. Now, we can see how the northern of Vietnam connect to the global location. And therefore, the business is gonna come. So you can see that all the information we put in figure here is in terms of through the airport and also through the port, the red and also the blue one. And it connects to the all key region, of Seoul, of the global location. This slide is a very important to explain to you the potential of the North. So we decided to look at who near us, what are they doing, what the GDP. We look at everything. And one thing that we would like to show you here, the China Silicon Valley, this corridor of Southeast corridor of China accounted 30% of China GDP. And guess how much China GDP? 17,000 billion USD. We're next to one of the richest guy. And what they doing, what the hub of manufacturing, I'm sure you are operating industrial park here, you already have this figure. Heavy industry, automotive, Electrolux, and also software. So, and remember the connectivity to this location, I mentioned about what it is key critical infrastructure by 3-way, air, highway, and also deep sea. One thing also very important is that Taiwan accounted for 63% global semiconductors. Such a tiny islands that contribute that massive semiconductors production. Korea accounted 18% of the global semiconductor production. That's so important that we're next to super critical economic corridor of the world, particularly to midstream and high stream production. That's a conclusion for my slide, for me, for this slide. Next, what's going on in the country? Like I mentioned earlier, I saw Korean has been committed even more than 20 billion USD into the country. And I just saw R&D center that they put in western and westlet of the north. Intel, the same thing. Within the country, you already heard, FPT has launched semiconductors production. Within our country, that's going on. Second of all, VinFast just signed the smart electric car with technologies AIs and also committed into in the future that producing semiconductors for cars. And to put it in perspective that here, TSMC and UMC are two biggest semiconductors producer from Taiwan. And then here is from Korean. That Samsung accounted 17%. So now, before we go into give the forecast on the growth of industrial and logistics sectors and other real estate sectors, let's have a look at the Asia Pacific countries, where we are, how can we forecast, what are our economy. I'm not an economist person, I'm a real estate person, but I think that always there's the link point together. Vietnam, now the economy 360 billion GDP. China, Taiwan, double size in terms of GDP. So a lot of forecasts saying that our GDP could be reached to Korean. Or there's another forecast saying our GDP could be as big as Japan. Why? Because we also go into semiconductors, midstream productions. A lot of, and you see that if we break down to the GDP, we see production accounted for 37%. Vietnam, similar to Japan. Countryside, two countries the same. Population-wise, Japan is 125 million. Vietnam, 100 million, right? So I would refer to let that open question. But actually what's going on in the country allow us to be optimistic about the future. That right now, with 360 billion USD population, GDP, but could be either in between. So let's see how the economy and also the policy of the government and also the commitment in terms of improving infrastructure completion going on in the future, and also the confidence in terms of a lot of more supply chain and investor into the country. So now, moving to the third part, we also can see that FDI moving ship from the north and the south, and also we can see that some key, again, Korean, Taiwan, Japan, are the key investor invested in manufacturing FDI in the northern of Vietnam. There's a lot of underneath data with the lighter point showing that the queen bees queen bee where they are. And also to break down to queen bees, there are falcons, there are also international queen bees, but also we see in some local corporation as a queen bee in the production as well. So economy of Vietnam has been rising, that attracting FDI outside of the country, and also local corporation has been rising up as well. Right now, total land is 13,000 hectares, and the future supply, we're going to talk about that at the moment. But if we look at the ready-built factory and also ready-built warehouse, Bắc Ninh and Hải Phòng are still accounted the biggest supply in the northern of Vietnam. Occupation-wise, it's about 86% to ready-built factory and 76% to ready-built warehouse. And I'm sure that a lot of you here getting this update from everywhere. So I'm not going to talk too detail about that. In terms of market trend, we see it that, up to 2025, we see that increasing the supply of industrial park together with the ready-built factory and also ready-built warehouse. And this is some figure to show the growth of those three particular asset class. Where they are. So they just give an illustration of all the future supply cluster where they are. And with the situation, I think that I took this photo back then, and some of the facility in the northern of Vietnam, similar to the southern of Vietnam, is still traditional qualification. In the future, with a lot of foreign capital from institutional developers that investing in acquiring the land bank, we're going to see a lot of more modern facility going to develop and hand over space to the clients. So what is the key trend? Of course, resilience to the weather is more than important, especially in the northern of Vietnam. You see a lot of blurry in the morning when you open your window. And also sustainable development, safety and automation. Cushman Wakefield has been really honored to participate in the project with Lego, and we are the ESG advisors for the entire project in the north and the southern of Vietnam. So we can see that is a commitment, a lot of multinational foreign corporations that are part of commitment to the UN for the more social responsibility to the climate change. And that going to be not a nice to have criteria for a lot of company operate their business anywhere in the world. That's a must. The only challenge is that how can that investor, you operate business, you're gonna thinking about a lot of challenge we can see from the developer standpoint and occupier standpoint, how we look at the sustainable development into a tangible value. Everyone thought that ESG is something so expensive, right? So I think that is something that we see as a challenge, how to implement it in anywhere, especially for emerging market. Cost rising for the land and everything. But again, it's not nice to have criteria. It's a must for everyone. Thank you so much.